My name is Jeff Klein. I'm the editor of RadioGraphics, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the RadioGraphics Public Information for Potential Authors course. This is course number SPRG 51. And I'm presuming you are here because you have been identified as being involved with, either as an author or co-author, of one of the exhibits presented at this annual meeting that is being considered for potential publication in the journal. So I want to congratulate everybody who is here. You should know that this year, as in other years, less than 10% of the exhibits that are displayed at the meeting are chosen or designated as being those that we would consider for submission. So you've cleared the largest hurdle in becoming an author of a paper in RadioGraphics. We have our staff from the Oak Brook and the Burlington, Vermont offices here that work with the journal, and they are going to present the information that you will need in order to hopefully prepare your manuscript, whether it's a standard manuscript or an online PowerPoint that's geared towards our members in training for potential publication in the journal. And at the end, I'll just finish up, and then we should have enough time at the end of this for any questions or issues that you might have that you want to pose to me. So we'll begin by introducing Stephanie Keogh, our first speaker. Stephanie is the Senior Manager of Peer Review for RadioGraphics here in the Oak Brook, Illinois office, and now she'll begin this session. Stephanie?
Everyone, my name is Stephanie Keogh. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be going over the solicitation process and the peer review workflow for RadioGraphics, just to give a little background of the workflow. I'm also going to go over the standard manuscript requirements, the standard training and fundamental requirements. The training and fundamentals were initially called the resident fellows. Those are the PowerPoints. Common mistakes and reasons for delays, what Melissa's going to go over. And then preparing images, videos, DICOM, and our PowerPoint templates are going to be gone over with by Jim. So yesterday we sent out the notification that you were identified for RadioGraphics, and next month we will be sending out the official invitation. So currently we're going to be screening that list of identified exhibits just to see if there's who we want to solicit for the journal. And then March 12th through April 16th, those are the main deadlines for submissions. And May 5th is also the last deadlines that we would be receiving papers. So when you receive your solicitation email, you would expect to receive this email from Scholar1. Scholar1 is our manuscript submission and processing site. You would see your exhibit number here, as well as your title and your deadline. And we would have instructions on how to submit your exhibit and what we require depending on the type of submission that we're soliciting, whether it's full-length manuscript or a PowerPoint submission. And at the bottom of the email, there's links to agree or to decline the invitation. So that would just automatically generate in our system saying that you've declined. So we prefer to just respond using those links, just so it's verified automatically in the system. This is just a screenshot of Scholar1 Manuscripts. This is our RadioGraphics site where we receive submissions and go through the entire peer review workflow. So when we're setting up your manuscript, we'll include your email and your title. And if you don't have an account in Scholar1, we'll just create one for you. And once you begin to log in, it'll just ask you to update your information. So when you log into Scholar1, it'll show a section here that says Invited Manuscripts. That's where you'll just click onto the manuscript that we've set up for you. We just included the title, the topic, which is either a full-length solicited education or a PowerPoint. And here's just the general steps that you would go through in submitting a manuscript. There's the file upload, updating the title and the abstract, the RadLex Subdictionary. That actually are the terms that we use to select peer reviewers. So it's any topics, modalities that are discussed in your paper that you would include in there. And then authors, institutions. This is where you could also update who the corresponding author is. So we send out the invitations to the presenters, but if the presenter is not the corresponding author, you could change that in that section, or just email us and we could update it for you. And that's like the final step of the process to submit. And this is just a screen capture of our public information for authors. It's our PIA page. This includes all the information that you need regarding word count and all of the documents that are required in a submission. So for full-length manuscripts, we require a general title page, a manuscript file which includes an abstract, a summary statement, the CME answers that are annotated within the text. As you can see, the CME file is a separate file that includes the 3 learning objectives and 10 multiple choice questions. And then the figures. So we require all of these to be submitted all at once, just so the peer reviewers could view all of the components of your paper. And if any file is missing, like the CME exercise document or perhaps the CME answers within the text, we will send it back just to get it finished up, just so it could be sent for peer review. So for the training and fundamentals requirements, the training fundamentals are the PowerPoint, so they're very similar to the exhibits that you've submitted. But they also include a title page, an expanded abstract, which is about 2 to 3 pages, and it includes about 2 figures. The PowerPoint presentation, which is the main submission, and as well as the two figures. So that just wraps up some of our requirements, and again, all of this is found on the PIA page on the RadioGraphics website. So I'm just going to pass it along to Melissa, who's going to go over the common mistakes and the reasons for delays in the peer review process.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. I'm actually fortunate enough to work in the RadioGraphics editorial office in the beautiful Green Mountain State with Dr. Klein. So one of the things that I work on is, working alongside with authors to kind of tackle some of the common mistakes or things that may happen that delay your manuscript from going from submission through Scholar1 to final acceptance. So one of the big things that we find is that although you've put a lot of effort in and all the components seem to be there, there may be a few pieces that may have been left out, and in order for us to send them and have them reviewed properly, we need those specific pieces. So the big things like that are the figure legends, the abstract, some of the answer keys to your CME test, and proper identification of your figures. That helps our reviewers to be able to understand where it fits into your paper and can give them a little bit more insight of where your paper is going. A big thing for us is making sure that when you submit your paper that you correctly identify the RadLex terms that describe your topic and the subject matters that might help us identify the proper reviewers for the review. So for example, if you just say that your RadLex term is pediatrics and you don't put anything like tumors in fetal imaging or something like that, it becomes very difficult for us to find the specialized reviewer in pediatrics that can really look at your paper. So those RadLex terms are very important. And if you have any issues or any questions about how to assign them or how to map them correctly, feel free to call us, because it's better to walk through that than to leave them blank. Another piece that seems to be one of the things that holds us up, even up to the date of before we go to production, is having the correct permissions for not only artwork that is supplied to your paper, but also acknowledgments. So for example, if you had a professor or a colleague that wasn't a contributor on your paper, but you want to acknowledge them that they did contribute to the paper and helped you kind of in whichever way that they want, we need written permission from them that says, yes, I would like to be acknowledged. And you can either send that to us via email or have it in a Word document that's uploaded into Scholar1 with your submission. The other thing that's very important is if you have an illustrator or someone in your department that creates all your graphics, but again is not necessarily a co-author on your paper, we would need them to fill out an artwork transfer of copyright form, and that just indicates what figures they had produced and permission from that illustrator that will allow us to publish the figures. And then the last piece is the submission of the ICMJE form and the copyright forms that we need from each author. So this past year we fixed Scholar1. Before, a lot of authors had a lot of difficulties opening and downloading the ICMJE form and then actually uploading it back into Scholar1. So we worked with Scholar1 and fixed that problem. So this year your authors should not have any issues. And if they do, they can always contact us. We can send them a blank form and then we can submit them for you so that we can work around that issue. But the most important thing when you are looking at this is that you may be, when you go in and you're the contributing author, you'll add the authors that are working on the paper with you. Make sure that you use their email address that's linked to their Scholar1 account. So for example, if you know that your co-author works at Mass General and you put their Mass General email in there and you don't see them having a Scholar1 account, perhaps you could reach out to them and say, do you have a Scholar1 account? And if so, is it mapped to the Mass General email or another one? Because if you don't do that, then the ICMJE form won't go to the correct email address and they might not get the right emails from you regarding some of the other components that we need. And it also creates duplicate accounts for people in Scholar1 and it causes a lot of searching and kind of retrieving information. And then the last thing that I can suggest to everyone is while you're uploading all of your files, whether it's a Word document or the very large figures that you might be uploading, be patient, because even though it looks like it might be pretty easy to upload 4 images at a time, Scholar1 sort of it like churns and burns and takes a long time to add a lot of those figures. So it may seem like it's taking maybe 10 minutes. Please be patient because it does take that long sometimes to process that. And I know for me, when I'm building the PDFs and it takes a while, I get impatient, but it's best to just hold tight and it will upload eventually. So does anyone have any questions or? Okay. And then lastly, if you have any questions in the future, feel free to email us at rg@rsna.org.
Thanks, Melissa. My name's Jim Clinton. I am the Assistant Director of Production at the Oak Brook headquarters, and I oversee both the production of both journals. So I just want to go over some basic preparing images for submission, and then we'll go over some of the supplemental materials that we accept as well. So the minimum resolution that we require for print is 300 dpi. And we realize that most of your programs or PAC stations may not output to 300 dpi, most of them 72 or 96 dpi. So as soon as you guys can, just go into like Photoshop or any kind of other kind of image editing software and bump up that resolution. So for the rest of this presentation, I'll use Photoshop as our kind of basis for the rest of my examples. And then if you're going to add arrows or keys or lettering or anything else to your images, use the shape tool in Photoshop and do not flatten those images. So keep them up there so, if you happen to put a black arrow on a darker gray area, we can improve the contrast of that and make sure that you guys get the best looking images that we can give you. So the image on the right hand part of this slide is the image size window in Photoshop, and this is where you can change your resolution. At the bottom, there are 3 boxes: says scale, styles, constraint proportions, and resample image. You want to make sure all those are checked. And then you want to adjust the resolution to 300 dpi, and that's the highlighted field on the bottom portion. And if the width is less than 3 inches when you change the resolution, your image probably isn't going to print right. So what you can do is go back to your where you outputted the image from, and just bump it up, export a larger image, and hopefully it'll come back with a good print size. And if that doesn't work for you, just feel free to get in touch with us. We have a really good production staff that we could help you work through this and get the best image quality. In terms of saving your images, we can work with a lot of different file types. The ones that we, as a production department, really like are the Photoshop native files, which are the PSD, TIFF, or EPS. They're all acceptable. Like I said before, don't flatten these images. Keep all the layers in there. This will make it easier for us to make any minor adjustments we may have to make. And when possible, save each figure part as its own separate file. We realize that some of your images need to be in a group, and that's totally acceptable. But when possible, save them out as separate files, because in page composition, it makes a little bit easier to fill as much white space as we can on each page. Some other notes about images: if you're going to use a screen capture, use as much of the screen as you can. I realize there's some limitations. If your program is only giving you a small image to use, that you may not have a choice. But if you can, give us the most of the image that you can give us. More is better in this case. Don't use any kind of file compression. That'll just degrade the quality of your images. And if you create a flowchart in Word or PowerPoint or a graph in Excel, go ahead and send us that file. We can use those files to create the best looking diagrams for you guys. So when you submit your files, like I said, submit it, each figure part as its own file when possible. The individual file size limit is 130 megabytes. That is a big file. Like I said, the more you can give us, the better. That is not for all of your images. That's figure 1A is 120 megabytes. You're good for the rest of your figures. So go ahead and send us the biggest file you can. We'll work with it. Don't zip your files together. Upload them individually. And the bottom note, Scholar1 renders TIFF files. So what I mean by this is, in Scholar1, you'll see an HTML version of your manuscript and your images. So if you send us TIFF files, Scholar1 will render that. But if you send us a Photoshop file, you'll also need to submit a Word document with your images in that Word document, so that way peer reviewers can see those images. Scholar1 does not render Photoshop or EPS. So just something to keep in mind. If you have any problems with this, go ahead and feel free to contact us. We'll walk you through this. Some of the supplements we accept: we do a lot of video work on top of the podcasts that we already work with. So go ahead and send us your video files in MP4 format. Remove any patient data that may be on the video file. You could just draw a black box over it, just any way you can get rid of it. And each movie will need its own separate caption, just like a figure. Recently, we started accepting DICOM stacks as supplemental material, and these show up in our image viewer. So Dr. Klein and I have been working a little closely on getting the presentation of these correct. Stacks you can submit as a zip file, and I realize that some stacks come through with upwards of 50 to 80 separate image files. So go ahead and zip those together. We don't need Scholar1 to render those for HTML view. We will compile the stack outside of that, and we review those as a team. One of the images from the stack must be a figure in your manuscript with the caption, so make sure that you just pick one of those out. And also go ahead and remove any patient data from the stack. I know that Photoshop has a DICOM stack feature, and there is an option in there to remove patient data. And then lastly, the RadioGraphics Fundamentals PowerPoint. Unlike the DPS, there is not a slide limit in this. So go ahead and use all the space you can in this. Make your font nice and legible, make it big, use nice big images. We encourage the use of video or voiceover. Make these interesting. They're a fun project to work on. They get converted into an HTML file that's that's viewable on mobile devices, computer, all that. Animations can be used, but we recommend keeping them to a minimum, just because when we convert these, some of them do tend to get lost. And it's, you guys are creating this, we want you guys to have the best presentation out there. So if we keep them to a minimum, it's easier for all of us. And use the provided template, which is actually the template we are presenting this on. So we will, when you submit a PowerPoint, we will make sure you guys get that template. So I know we ran through some of this pretty quick, but if you have any questions on Photoshop or images, any of the supplements or anything, please let me know. Myself or any of the production staff or Stephanie or Melissa, would be glad to help you guys out. So thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So just a last word about a couple of items that maybe weren't touched upon. So it turns out that beginning with this next year in 2018, as you know, there's a CME test that's associated with every article, not with every PowerPoint, but with every standard manuscript that we publish in the journal. And the ability to include true-false questions is now allowed as part of the CME tests associated with journal articles, or in fact, for that matter, any CME for the RSNA. So when you create your CME tests, there's 10 questions that are created, 2 of which should be image-based questions that are to be submitted with your article. One of those 10 questions can be a true-false question. In the January issue and on the PIA pages, there will be instructions, and there's actually a little tutorial from Dave DeSantis that's going to appear in the January issue that will highlight this change, which I think will make it easier for you as authors, because you'll be able to include that true-false question as one of your 10 questions. The last thing to touch on, which is always a little bit of a sensitive topic, is deadlines. So the deadlines, as I think Stephanie alluded to, are fairly tight within a 2-month window or so in the spring. And I think we all understand that there are sometimes extenuating circumstances that preclude you from submitting a paper by the deadline. However, from the journal's perspective, you should understand that we do have a limited amount of space in the journal. The invitation to submit is really, to my mind, an opportunity, and I think a very good opportunity, to get your work out there so that our members and readers can use it for their educational purposes. It's not a guarantee, of course, but you should know that if we look at this fairly closely, each year that we extend invitations, we look at the number of, or percentage of papers that are accepted from those that we invite. And from last year's meeting, when we extended invitations to 139 or 140 papers, we accepted over 80% of what was submitted. However, if you're late for submission, or when you ask for extended deadlines, I think you put that at risk, because again, we only have a limited amount of resources and space. And it's also, I think you should realize, as authors who have an opportunity to submit, there are other authors that would very much like the opportunity to submit. And so when you are late with submissions, or you get multiple extended deadlines, you are in some ways sort of precluding others from having an opportunity to submit and have their material considered. So if there are issues with deadlines, you should contact one of the staff. You should feel free to contact me by email or by phone. I'll be happy to provide that information to you. And for that matter, if you need any guidance on formatting your material, whether it's a standard manuscript or a PowerPoint, beyond what you can glean from the PIA pages and obviously from this presentation, which I think is going to be recorded, and this material will be available for you and for those obviously who weren't able to attend the course, you should feel free to reach out to us, because our goal really is to try and maximize your opportunity to get what has already been acknowledged by a large group of experts is exemplary educational material. So it's in our best interests and in your best interests to try to get things submitted on time and properly, and to get your material published hopefully in the coming year. So with that, think we must have set a record for timing, probably. But I think we'll stick around since we've finished early. If you have any questions for any of the staff or for me, we'll stick around for a little while. I'd be happy to answer your questions. If not, again, congratulations on being acknowledged as someone or as individuals who have submitted wonderful material for the meeting, and I wish you the best of luck during the process in the coming months. Any? That wasn't meant for applause, but anyway, any questions that any of us can sort of direct to the audience or that we haven't touched on? The other thing I did want to mention, which I think is important for authors, is beginning this year, many of the papers that we are going to consider are going to be evaluated not only by myself, but also by the members of our editorial board in each subspecialty, which I think really affords the best evaluation, if you will, of the material in the various subspecialties, which is something a lot of journals do. And traditionally, the editor-in-chief has been the one to render decisions, but we are going to engage our editorial board members in each subspecialty in making decisions on a subset of the papers. So hopefully when you get your decision, which is hopefully in the affirmative, you'll realize that it's been evaluated not just by myself, but by somebody who's an expert in the field. So any questions or comments for us? Or is it all crystal clear? Or? All right, if not, I'll just close, and again, we'll stay up here and be available if you have any questions for us. So thanks again, and safe travels home.